Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. Mike, I'm back from SEC Media Days, and that's what we've got a ton of questions about this week. We're going to start off with one from Lanny, who asks, what is your evaluation of Pittman, Green, Armstrong, and Jackson at Media Days? Did they help sell Arkansas to their fans?
Yeah, I like the way that he phrased that question, because if you really think about Media Days, why does it matter if Arkansas sells itself to other fans of other teams around the SEC? Why does that matter? What you really want to do, honestly, if you're Arkansas at this point, is you want to sell to your own fans, we're different. We're not going to be the same. Now, we tried to do that last spring, and I thought all of the media did a good job of sort of covering the differences, the difference Petrino was making, the new quarterback, the new running backs, the new offensive line, and all that stuff. I don't know that we were very successful on that, at least. And the problem I've got is that you don't get feedback from fans that aren't on the internet. And I still say there are more that aren't that are. So we're sort of reacting a lot of times to what? People on the internet who are what? A lot of them are angry. So you're probably not going to change somebody like that's mind if they're already mad and they think Sam Pittman can't win. You're probably not going to reach that person. But what you can do, if you go to Media Days, a lot of fans are going to be watching this stuff on television and maybe reading about it in a newspaper or even a website that they may look at. Then you have an opportunity to do that. And I really felt like that Sam Pittman did. I was talking to Alyssa about this before they appeared. And I said, I'm telling you, he's going to be very honest. He's going to answer questions. He's not going to say, I'm not on the hot seat. He's going to acknowledge that he is, and he's going to explain why he is. Now, in doing this, what happened? I immediately saw some guy that was all ticked off, and you were there, he made some reference to KJ Jefferson and maybe letting him do some things or not managing him well or something like that. Do you recall that?
Yeah, I remember that question, yeah.
And so he admitted that was one of the mistakes that he made. And this guy goes, he should never admit that. What's wrong with him? Why didn't he do it? Well, here's the point about that. Whatever mistake you admit that you made, the only relevant issue now is, do you make sure that you don't do that again, right?
Right.
Because you can't do anything about something you didn't do or did do wrong. He talked about, I think it was the LSU game where they went for 2 field goals inside the 5-yard line in the first half. If you actually score on both of those, then it's a 3-point loss. You probably win that game. And he talked about maybe you got to be a little more aggressive, or maybe you got to listen to your offensive coordinator more and things like that. So he's talking about things that he might do differently this time around. I think that's good, and I think a rational fan looks and says, okay, he said he made a mistake here, should have done that, he's going to do this, and this is going to change certain things, and that's good. And so hopefully if you're Arkansas, what that does is sell tickets, because they got to sell tickets. So to me, that's what Media Days is really all about, is how you reach out to your own fans and what's the reaction. And I was watching it, and I think I'm fairly objective. I thought it was good. I thought Taylen Green did a good job of talking about, what he's going to add as the quarterback. I thought Andrew Armstrong did a good job of talking about how the offense has changed. And I thought Landon Jackson did a good job of talking about the defense and certain things. And he then talked about the offensive line and how much better they are. Yeah. So when you put all that together, I thought it was a success, but I didn't think it wouldn't be. Sam Pittman's good in Media Days.
Yeah, everybody.
He's always been good.
People always say that. Even the national media, when we were going up and talking to them about Sam Pittman, one of the first things that come out of their mouths when we talk about this program and Sam Pittman is that we love Sam Pittman. We really do. Because how can you not? When you're there and he's talking to you and he's interacting with you.
Because so many times you get non-answers to questions.
Yeah.
You give an answer, but it's not really an answer.
Yeah, and he attacks them head on. I did not think he was going to address the hot seat like he did, and in such a way where he commanded the entire room. We were in that room. We were sitting right in front of him, and him talking to that reporter and going, I know, my seat's real hot. Yeah. I know, I'm number 1 on that list.
Right.
And then kind of talking about why he's on that list and how things are going to change. I thought he he definitely
And
commanded
I thought
respect.
they all did. So
They did.
I just think they did what they were supposed to do when they went down there.
And I was really surprised by. I knew Landon Jackson was going to be good. He was there last year. Taylon Green, talking to him in spring ball, he was great. Andrew Armstrong, man,
Yeah,
he
he's
has
really good.
opened up. I love that they brought him, and he was. I go, oh man, I don't know what kind of sound bites we're going to get from him. He was great. I have to say, whoever did some media training with him in the offseason, great job.
Where was he at? Texas A&M Commerce or whatever?
He probably hadn't ever, done this
Going
before.
into last year, so he plays 1 year at Arkansas, and now here he is at Media Days.
It's great. Mousedown says, you said that in Dallas, Pittman would do a good job of accepting responsibility for last season, that he would lay out his mistakes and explain what he's done to correct them, that honesty is his best asset. So is that what happened?
Yeah, we've already talked about it. It is what happened, but I would add one more thing to this, because this is something that I noticed watching at home, because I was off that day. He goes on the set with the SEC network crew, and that's Dari Nokwa and 4 former players who are all analysts? Okay, Sam gets on there, and Nokwa could have just vanished, because now he's talking football with football guys. And he's talking about certain things that Petrino is doing and the way he's changed things, and it's not total X's and O's. I mean, people that are watching could understand, but he's talking football with football guys. And all of a sudden they start asking him questions and back and forth and blah, 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 and blah. Then I went off somewhere else for about an hour, came back and was watching somebody else on there, and they were talking about, they would have people on and then they would talk themselves in between coaches coming on there. And these guys were still talking about Petrino. And I remember one of them in particular said, maybe we ought to reevaluate Arkansas. Maybe we've underestimated these guys. Boy, it sounds like he's really made some changes. So that was one other thing that happened, and that happened because of Pittman and the way he sold those analysts, not Nokwa himself, who's just a guy like us, a media person, but former players sold them on the idea that, hey, we've got this new offensive coordinator, and here's what he did last spring, and here's what he's going to mean to our team this fall.
Yeah, I think that's a big statement right there when you come back hours later and they're still talking about Arkansas on the broadcast. I mean, that shows that obviously something they did.
As you're going to tell us later on, the media didn't necessarily do that. They didn't necessarily know what Arkansas was going to do.
And I will tell, we have a question about that. We're going to talk about that in more detail, but you're right. There were some media members there that go, what's the big storyline with Arkansas? Besides Bobby Petrino, they didn't know one. Besides Sam being on the hot seat, they couldn't tell you who the new QB was.
Exactly.
So we're going to go into that in just a second. But I like this question from Hog Redneck, who says, you and Alyssa disagreed last week about Petrino in media days. You said he would be flying under the radar, that the media would be sleeping on him. She said his name would come up a lot. Looks like she was right.
Yeah, she was right, and I was definitely wrong, and you were there, so you know how wrong I was. Here's what I kind of went on, and I'm going more on Arkansas fans for some reason, because I read a lot of, Twitter stuff, X stuff, especially from Arkansas fans, because I follow, and then there's certain Facebook groups that I read, and there's just all this skepticism about the team, and it's almost like Petrino's not even a factor. When I read this stuff, I don't see people saying, well, yeah, but they don't have the same offensive coordinator. And things are going to be a little bit, it's not the same team. When people start talking about, they're going to win, they're still going to finish, they're going to win 4 games, still going to finish at the bottom, and all this stuff. And it's like, Petrino's not even, I think it's the biggest thing Sam Pittman did in the offseason. And it was the first thing he did. So my impression was that people are sleeping on this. And I guess I just assumed that it was happening everywhere else too, because I didn't think there would be a lot of discussion about him. But you said from the first minute you got there, they were asking about 2 things. They were asking about Pittman being on the hot seat, and I say they. These are other media people that don't know anything about Arkansas, because they do what a lot of people do at media days. They're not educated. They don't educate themselves when they show up. They just walk around.
Like, what's going on here? Who is this person? You know?
I mean, that's bad. That's one of the things I don't like about me. And I noticed that going back 10, 12 years ago. First one I went to, and I don't know how long ago that was, it just seemed like a bunch of clueless people that were there, and they knew a lot about the team they were covering, and maybe the top 2 teams, maybe an Alabama situation or whoever was supposed to be the next. They seemed to know about teams at the top.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But-
Alabama and
then
Georgia.
maybe the team
yeah.
they cover, but then everybody else was just a blank. It was
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, it was crazy to me because when I got there, and I would have agreed with Alyssa, I have to say, because the two questions I was prepared to get, I got right off the bat when we walked in and talked about, oh, Pig Trail Nation, you cover Arkansas, right? Yes, we cover Arkansas. Well, how hot is Sam Pittman's seat? How many games he got to win this year? That was quick
Right.
to be asked. And then the second thing was Bobby Petrino. How do you feel about Bobby Petrino being back? How has he changed things? I mean, that was the things.
So maybe people, the media outside of Arkansas, are more realizing that could be a big deal than some of our own fans. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I went on a radio station in Nashville, and that was the first thing they asked me was about Bobby Petrino and Sam Pittman. And so I didn't get any questions about, Taylon Green or what the defense will look like this season. Nope, just what do you think about Petrino? And when will Sam Pittman be fired, if he'll be fired?
Yeah.
So that's what I got. Armand Abbey wants to know, were there any big surprises from Media Days? Something that had you going, what? For me, it was Dorkowitz. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to say that with a straight face. The guy wasn't his usual annoying self. If he was like this more often, I would probably stop calling him Dorkowitz.
Yeah, he was very different, and even everybody noticed it. And when he was I think when he got on with the SEC Network people, they were asking about why are you so different? Because he's always been kind of this guy that kind of pops off and he definitely takes shots at Arkansas, but he just pops off in general.
Well, he has good sound bites. He's always has good sound bites.
But he was doing none of that. He was being very low key. And he ended up admitting, he said, when you are the hunter, that would be the team that's out there to get beat other teams. You have to kind of do that to get attention. You have to do that to fire your own team up. But he said, when you're the hunter, and that means now he thinks they have arrived. They're one of the best teams right now in the preseason. They probably are.
Yeah.
Although I still see them in this poll. Where were they picked? 5th, 6th?
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to look at it
I think
again,
he sees them top 3 maybe, or top 4. But he said when you are the hunted, then you low key it. Then you don't need to do that anymore. Then it's all about you just being as good as you think you are, and you let other people worry about, how good some other teams are. So and it was a good explanation, and I agree. If he continues to act this way, then I don't think a lot of fans at Arkansas will have an issue with him. It's just the probing and the popping off and the little remarks that he has made in the past. Will this whole Arkansas rivalry thing continue? I guess it will. Here's the way.
I guess it will.
Well, there's almost no way to get away from it. I'm not a Missouri fan, so I can't answer this question for Missouri fans, but if I could, I would ask them, the two schools, Arkansas and Missouri, had no previous history together, almost never played. How do you suddenly come into a league and look over there and go, I don't like that guy, I want to beat him every year? It doesn't make any sense. Arkansas has a long history of the teams that they consider themselves rival with. And plus, you also get into this thing, and I was having a discussion with people in Hogville about this, and one guy was adamant. He said, a rivalry can't exist unless both teams hate each other. I disagree with that 100%. You can dislike a team, want to beat them badly. They're the team you want to beat more than anybody else, so therefore they are your rival, and that team may not care about you that much. I think that's the way it was with Arkansas and Texas a lot of times.
Yeah.
Because Oklahoma and A&M have always been a bigger deal to Texas than Arkansas is. So I think it can be that way. I don't think it has to be one-sided. But if you ask somebody from Missouri, what is it? I'd like to know an honest answer. I would like an opportunity to sit down with somebody that's a Missouri fan and say, why when you entered this league, why didn't you look at Alabama, or why didn't you look at Tennessee or some other team and go, we want to beat them? I would think Kentucky, that's pretty close to there. Close enough, and Kentucky's somebody.
I think it's because
Arkansas has not done enough lately. In the time, here's another thing I would say. People say, even Arkansas fans say this, well, they should be a rival is the way they've been beating us. Well, the reason Missouri has beaten Arkansas isn't because Missouri's been all that good either. It's because the history of when Missouri and Arkansas have played have been right in this place when Arkansas went bad. When did Arkansas start to go bad? Right after Petrino left. That's when they started to go bad, and it's been bad ever since overall. There have been a few decent years, but that's right in the period when Missouri came in. Okay, Arkansas is not that big a deal. Wouldn't your rival wouldn't it be a team that if you beat them, you'd done something? I don't understand that. But what I do understand is the Texas thing, because there's a lot of reasons why Razorback fans never liked the Longhorns, and a lot of it had to do, honestly, with the arrogance of their fans. It wasn't anger toward Darrell Royal or some other Texas coach or their players. They weren't bad. There wasn't anything you could single out about them and say they were bad. It was their fans. They were arrogant. They had, you know, when I was a kid, here's what used to bother me about Texas. If you beat them, and I was growing up in Lubbock, and so I'd go to a Texas Tech fan, and you almost never beat them. But if you ever did beat them, it was a big deal. But you'd watch their fans, they'd act like they didn't lose the game. They would stand up and do that, I was at Texas, and they just act like they were perfectly fine, and nothing was wrong, and they didn't really lose. I want to see a team that when you lose, it hurts you.
Yeah.
And I don't think it bothers them to lose. They just kind of go, oh, we didn't lose. We're okay, be good next week. So that I think has a lot to do with why Arkansas fans didn't like them. So I can explain why Arkansas fans feel the way they do about Texas. I don't know how to explain why Missouri fans don't like Arkansas. I don't get that.
Maybe they just accepted it. They were like, okay, these are our rivals. I think that truly, that when I talk to like at least some fans and some of the fan base, they'll be like, yeah, we just accepted that those are our rivals. And I don't think Arkansas has to, you know, I don't think Arkansas fans have to accept that.
When Arkansas went into the SEC, they had the same problem. You're going into a new conference, all your old rivals are gone. What do? And I think there was some confusion for a couple, 3 years, but you know what they finally figured out pretty quickly? LSU. That was a team they wanted to beat. And that was before the boot thing. And then when the boot thing came along, it came along because of Arkansas fans wanting that to be a rivalry.
But it's interesting because we asked LSU players at SEC Media Days, and they did not care about it.
They don't.
They were like, we did not care at all. But it was interesting asking the Texas players and having them talk about the historic rivalry between Arkansas and Texas, and how it dates back way before they were born, and just they seemed to know about it. That's what I thought was really interesting. Is like either they were very media trained going into this, and they
I think
read
there was some of that.
Okay, true, but I just think, you know, with LSU players being like, we don't care if we don't have to play Arkansas.
The Arkansas-Texas rivalry thing was kind of two-sided in the years of Darrell Royal and Frank Broyles because they were such good friends, and both programs were good. Arkansas won its share of games. But I think overall, after that, it was still pretty much Texas was going OU, A&M, they're our rivals, not Arkansas. I mean, that's just my view of the thing.
Well, again, this is why it's so interesting with the SEC expanding. Now you have these rivalries renewed, and that was a big thing talked about, is that Texas was very excited. They brought it up on their own, that they said, we're now having some rivalries brought back.
So in 2025, you'll probably have a chance to go down to Austin, and then you can tell everybody what that was like.
There you go. I've actually never been to Austin.
I have.
You have? Oh, that's exciting.
It's a weirdo place.
Pig's Feet says the SEC media voted Arkansas 14th out of 16th and only included one player on the All-SEC list. Are the Hogs really that talent poor?
No, they're not. And you've got some insight on this, and even the conference may be complicit in this, but it's more of what we said before. You got people that don't go to media days to really find out about the whole conference. If they did, they'd do more research, especially if you're going to vote in something like that.
Absolutely.
Give people the impression this is where your team's going to finish because this is what the whole SEC media says. There are some people that are actually educated on that. A few of those media people are really good. They have done research into all those teams, but a lot of them haven't. And then you pointed out that on terms of voting for all conference players, there were suggestions in there.
Yeah, you get recommended players.
And you didn't get any recommended players from Arkansas.
Well, that's the thing. You get Landon Jackson. I saw Landon Jackson, but again, they give you recommended. Now you can search for whoever you want, right? If you want to vote Taylon Green to be the first team All
But
SEC
what were the
quarterback.
suggestions?
Well, they were all over the place. It's whoever is the top players
But who
in
are,
each of their
who,
position
who are
groups.
putting these suggestions on a piece
I would say
on something you get? They distribute it to you, right?
Right, they do.
The
Yeah.
people running media days go, hell, here's some things, and you pick it up, and here's the suggestions. I don't think it came from Billy Bob out in West Fork, Alabama, or somewhere. It had to be people in the SEC office
that are curating.
and so
these
they're
lists,
putting
yes.
almost nobody from Arkansas on that list. So is it a shock that nobody in Arkansas would be voted on?
Exactly, because these people, they don't expect everyone who goes to media days to know every single player on every single roster, right? So, right, there
So
you go.
they will
so
take
they
your
will give you
suggestion.
recommended.
So if you do that, you're not really voting what you think. You're voting what somebody at the SEC office suggested that you voted for.
Now you can vote for whoever you want. Like I said, if you're from Arkansas and you got the
you
SEC
should not
Media Days
need
voting,
a list like that.
you should just be able to just free for all, pick your
do
three
your
top.
research. If you're going to vote on a preseason All SEC team, do a little bit of research. Don't. Oh, what does the SEC office tell me I should do? Okay, I'll do that.
They're just giving you the top players in each of those position groups. That is what they're doing
whatever.
I think to just help some people along. I agree with you, Mike. It's a little shady. They should just say, who do you think the top 3 players in each position group is? And then just let everybody write in, right? That would be the best, just to write it in instead of having those lists. But you're exactly right. There are some people that don't know enough about Arkansas to vote anybody else, right? So they see Landon Jackson as one of the top 3 in his position group, and they go, well, there you go. That's in his position there. That's what he's going to get voted as. So does that make sense a little bit? So I don't think that people know enough about the teams to really, really give yourself a great vote there. So, and there was somebody who voted there, South Carolina, to win it all, to win the conference.
That's another thing that I would tell you. Is there are people that show up to do nothing but vote their team in, even though it's ridiculous.
Correct.
I promise you, I never, in the times that I was at media, ever picked Arkansas to win the conference because I never felt like they would.
Well, there you go.
I mean, even when those years when Petrino was here, I felt like they might finish second or third. I didn't think they'd win the whole thing, and they didn't.
Well, and you're doing what you're supposed to do there. You're supposed to try and be as unbiased as possible. But again, you have some people that go there
Let
vote
me
whatever
point
they
out
want.
this too. There are people that aren't real media. I'm just telling you. All you have to do is get yourself a website on the internet and name it. It can be, Alabama Sports, Alabama Football Forever. And it's a media website, and you get people to join up on it, and then you call yourself media, and then you send in for credentials under that website, and they'll give it to you sometimes. I don't know what the process that they go through in deciding whether or not you get in, but it doesn't benefit them to turn people away. One of the things they brag about at SEC Media Days is the total number of media people they have there, because that shows how big their conference is, because how about it shows that you're just letting virtually anybody get in there and call themselves media.
Sure. I mean, you're exactly right. There are some websites there that I go, what is this website? And who do you cover? And, I'm just an SEC Football Forever website person. And you're like, what is that? So I don't know the vetting process that they go through, but I do know that you have to have something to show for it. And there are some people that get turned away, but you're right. They like to let more people in than not. I was there in 1969, asked, given the 16-team format in SEC football, do you think the Arkansas Razorbacks will ever win an SEC title now?
I'm sure, considering how long Arkansas has been in the league and now it's even tougher, there are going to be people who say, no, it will never happen. Here's what I would say about that. I don't know when, but yes, they will win unless the world comes to an end or they do away with college football. Sooner or later, they're going to win it. And here's why I say this, because it's about getting the right coach. And I'll make this point. Before John McDonnell was hired as the head track coach at Arkansas, I think at that point the Southwest Conference had been around for something like 60 years. They had never won a single title in track, ever, in 60 years. He takes the job. Suddenly, they end up winning more track championships than you can even count People lost count of the number. They won like 10 years in a row or something. They're just winning, winning, winning. And then they started winning national championships, not just conference. Frank Broyles told me one time, he said, I hired him because I wanted him to win conference titles. That's what we want to do is win conference. Well, he did that, but then he won national championships. Okay, if somebody had walked up to anybody that knew anything about track or just a typical Arkansas fan, the year before John was hired, hey, you think when do you think Arkansas will win the SEC in track? They're going, never done it before, probably never, right? Then what happened? Just all of a sudden it completely flipped. So if you hire the right guy, it's got nothing to do with being at Arkansas. People have always said that, no, it's just not big enough state. There's not enough football teams in the state. What do you think Arkansas is? Is this some big track mecca in this state? You know, is it just,
they come in from everywhere.
They come in from everywhere. He gets some people from here, but he gets them not just all in the United States. He goes all over the world to get people.
Look at the Jamaicans on the team.
Exactly.
Look at the people from England.
So it's got nothing to do with being here and being a small state. Can't do this, can't do that. You can put can't tos up there all you want to. If you hire the right guy, and it could happen in football, they just haven't hired the right guy. I'm telling you. And when they do, and somebody will eventually, then you're going to see it change.
I hope you're right on that, Mike Irwin. I hope you're right
there. The fans love football to the point where if you ever hired the right guy, they'd have to add to that stadium. There'd be 100,000 people in there if you're winning national championships.
Oh, absolutely.
They'd be just like the Aggies, just like Alabama, just like they'd have a huge. They're drawing 60 and 70,000 now and finishing 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. What do you think would happen if you had a genuine team like they were in the 60s, where Arkansas finished 3rd in the number of total wins for the entire decade? If you have something like that, and what did they do? They hired the right coach, Frank Broyles.
Right.
And you saw what happened.
Yeah. And got to have the right leadership at the top. That is exactly how you do it. Hot Dogger wants to know, how is the SEC commissioner chosen and who decides? Do they have requirements? Could a coach like Saban or an AD like Yurachek be considered? Is their tenure as commissioner a lifetime, or is there a limit?
No, there's no lifetime. It's done by a contract, just like anybody else.
But there's no term limits,
no,
right?
You sign a contract if it's for 5 years or whatever, and then it has to be renewed.
Yep.
Okay, the conference commissioner has a boss, has bosses, just like at a university. And the bosses are either the president or the chancellor at every school in the league. You know, it may be both, I'm not sure, but they are the ones that vote. I'm sure they go out when they're trying to decide about hiring a new commissioner. I'm sure they run it by all of these people, and then they vote and decide, okay, who do we want? Okay, we're going to hire this guy. Now, most of the time, as far as what do you have to do to get that job, you're not going to get that job because you were a successful head coach. You might have been a head coach at some time in the past, but you're going to get that job because you've gotten into athletic administration and you've probably worked at another conference, a smaller conference, or you've been at the current conference in a subordinate role and they moved you up. That's how Greg Sankey, he was a conference commissioner at a smaller conference, then he went to work for several years at the SEC office and moved himself up, and he was really the number 2 guy.
Yeah.
So when Mike Slive left, they just moved him up. They said, yeah, this guy's doing a good job, and they asked all the presidents and chancellors of I think it was it 14 schools in, I think it was.
Yeah.
You ask all of them, and then they vote. And he got the job.
Yeah. And they do it, I mean, it's also like a search committee for anything, right? They go out and they see, they kind of look at different candidates as well.
But
and obviously,
apparently an amazing number of times, because there's only been 8.
Right.
8 in the history of the conference. But most of the time, it's somebody that was already there.
That makes sense.
Somebody they're familiar with.
But somebody like Hunter Yurachek could be put up for that position.
I think he wouldn't go directly from an AD to conference commissioner.
Right.
I think he would have to go to work as in an office, in a conference office, and work his way up.
There you go. All right. Well, Parallax Pig says lots of conversation about the future of college football. One topic is a college football draft. We've even talked about that on this show before. I personally think that's where we end up, and it'll be some type of hybrid draft with 17 draft picks per team. He goes on to say the remaining team members will go through the current recruiting/walk-on process. This could be a significant amount of money for 17 players. Each player drafted would sign a 2 to 3 year contract, which would allow them to be traded to other teams or cut by the current team at the end of that contract. I assume he's asking what you think of that plan.
Yeah, he is, and he put a lot of thought into it.
He did.
I don't want to poo-poo it because I guess it could happen, but let me tell you why I disagree with all of that. Because the whole purpose of this so-called super division, the whole purpose of it is to try and get college athletics back as close to the way it was as you possibly can. Now, they've acknowledged, and you got to understand how this came about. Various people that represented the college athletics started talking with people in the legal profession because it came out of this fact that the SEC was not allowed to. They announced they had an inquiry and they announced that 3 SEC schools, I think, or maybe it was the NCAA, I can't remember if it was SEC or NCAA, but they were going to put these teams on probation because they had violated the one of 2 NIL rules, the big one, which was you can't use an NIL deal to recruit. In other words, I'm Tennessee, I want this quarterback over here. We're going to go over and say, hey man, you come to our school, we'll get you $1 million a year. According to the rules, you couldn't do that. You were told, hey, come to our school, I promise you we'll get you an NIL deal, but we can't discuss it until after you're on campus and after you've signed. Well, that got challenged immediately, and it's still in the courts. So that's what caused this situation we're in right now where there's no rules. You just do whatever you want. Everybody started doing whatever they want now. It's open bidding for players. And they're trying to get away from that. So what they did was they sat down and talked with these legal people and said, what do we have to do? Because we're going to ruin college athletics. Fans don't like this. Coaches don't like it. Players love it, especially the top players because they get all this money. And they said, look, you've just got to take care of, you can't just continue to sit here and roll in 50 and 60 and $70 million off TV rights from all of these television revenue and then your live gate stuff, and then your coaches are making $8 and $10 million a year, and your assistant coaches, your coordinators are making $1 million or $1.5 million, and your assistant coaches are making $800,000. Everybody's making a wad of money except the players. You got to change that. So they said, okay, what if we want to make a distinction between NIL money and if you're an employee, because if you're an employee of the university, they're paying you, the school is paying you out of their budget, which is separate from NIL. NIL money is not part of a school budget.
Right.
It's money that's contributed on the side by boosters or whatever. So if you go to work for a school, if you're an employee of the school, then what they can do is they can do the other thing that is an issue right now with the courts, which is what do you do about those that aren't getting anything? Because there are a lot of people that are getting no NIL money. Yeah. So if you say, what we will do is we'll take $30 million out of our athletic budget and we will earmark that for every athlete on scholarship, men, women, every sport. Now the courts are liking you because now you're being equal. You're not discriminating. So what I'm told is if they do this, the courts have said, we think if you do all of that, we will be much more favorable in these rulings when you have somebody break the rules. And what they're hoping, I think, is that, number one, you can go back to this rule. I think you'll still have players, certain players, the big ones, the ones that are the top quarterbacks, the top running back, they're still going to be allowed to get an NIL deal. But it will be back under the old rule, which is can't do that, can't work that out until you get to our school. We'll help you. We'll direct you to an agent, but it's got to be separate from us, and it's got to be through an agent. So I think you get back to that, and then you're allowed to enforce that. If a school starts trying to bid for a player, because think about it, if everybody's getting paid the same, and this is what this would be.
Right.
In other words, I'm going to the University of Alabama, I'm going to get $35,000 a year plus my scholarship. You know that. So there's no bidding on that. You're going to get the same if you go to Auburn. They've got the same deal.
Right, but then you can get varying amounts of NIL money
If
through community
yes,
members,
you can,
right?
but you can't. the school can't say, hey, we'll give you more than Auburn will. If you get caught doing that,
But to be fair, a booster could go out and see that player and go, hey,
it's a
this
violation of. It would be a violation of the rule.
that's what they have to go back. That's what they
they're-
need to
That's what they
crack
want
down on.
is to be able to enforce that rule.
Right.
To prevent you, because that's what you don't do in the NFL. You can't go out and offer deals to people because you have a draft. Now he's talking about a draft. Let me talk about why the draft won't happen. These aren't adults. You're going to tell me you're going to take an 18-year-old kid who's always wanted to play for Arkansas or always wanted to play for Tennessee or Alabama, and he grew up and his family went there or he had friends there, and you're going to tell him, I'm sorry, you can't go there. You're going to be drafted by Iowa over here, and you don't want to go to Iowa. See, that's not going to happen.
No.
So the
Well,
draft.
you'll have players that will go and say, okay, then I'm not playing, then I'm not doing it. That's how you crumble.
Yeah, so the
what
draft
it's
is not
about.
going to happen. But if you do it this way, you can get some NIL money, but you can't cheat in order to do it. And it's taking the bidding process out. Now let's talk about the other part of this, which is the transfer portal. And right now you had what amounts to unlimited free agency in college athletics, which is you can sign an NIL, you can get a big NIL deal, and they can give you all the kind of money and stuff. You go to school for a year, and some other school offers you more. You just jump.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, again, because you're willing to do this with this the courts are going to say, okay, we'll let you enforce the transfer rule back to the way it was. So, for instance, they might make a rule that says, okay, if you come here now, you can't just, if you transfer to another school after a year
have
here
to
or 2
sit,
years,
yeah.
you got to sit out, and you're not getting any NIL money while you sit out, or maybe a reduced amount of NIL money. Now, what happens, though, if I recruit a kid, he comes to my football program, and he's not what I thought he was? Am I stuck with him? Probably under this system, unless I can find another school that does this same thing, another one of these super division schools that says, we'll take him, we think he's pretty good. Then you can go, okay, we'll release you, and he can go and he doesn't lose NIL money, and he doesn't have to sit out a year. You see what I mean?
I understand what you mean. Yeah, I could bring up the point where I texted you when we were listening to Greg Sankey in the big media room, and him going, what have some of the athletes told you that they want to see in the future? And he says, yeah, these are some of the things they want. They don't want contracts. They don't want to be contracted by each
And
university.
here's why they don't want.
Right.
Here's why they don't want it. Because they got the best of pro football without any of the curves. Because you've got unlimited free agency. You don't have that in pro sports. You don't have to worry about a contract. You just jump anytime you want to.
Absolutely.
And there's no salary cap. You can just get as much money as they give you, so you can just be bidded for. So again, that what he's proposing might be nice for it sounds like to me it'd be a really good thing for some people, but I don't know. First of all, athletes would hate the draft. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I don't think they would willfully want to play if they had to be drafted. I really think you'd see players.
You would have
turn
some
around.
that wouldn't care. They'd go somewhere
Sure.
to get more money.
Sure.
But there are plenty of them that would say, hey, I'm not going to that school. I hate those guys.
Absolutely, and they would turn around and say, fine, then I'm not going to play. Then I'm not going to do it.
How many, go talk to a high school guy. I guarantee you, he will tell you a school he's always hated.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah.
I wasn't recruited or anything, but
Yeah.
there were schools I hated. You think if I was a good athlete, I'd want to go to that school just because they drafted me?
Mike, I've been playing a lot of college football, the new college football game this weekend. And listen, the amount of athletes that say, I'm a deal breaker school for them. No, I'm not coming there. You cannot even talk to me because I would never come to a school
Yeah,
because
exactly.
X, Y, and Z. There are athletes that absolutely, like you said, will not go to certain schools.
Again, I am hopeful, and based on what I've heard, the so-called super division is an attempt to get us as close back to the way things were as possible. It's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
But it's taking away some of the professionalism that we see right now.
Absolutely. We have a question about that super division. That's our final question. But before we get to that, Mike, we are going to talk about some baseball. And I love this question from WV Hog Fan, who asked, after the MLB draft, the new recruiting class transfers in and out, what does the baseball roster look like for the coming season? And I mean,
Looks
actually,
good.
Looks good. I was shocked at
Biggest
how well
news
they
is
did.
Kendall Diggs.
Yep.
They got him back. And I've already read some reaction. Well, he didn't do very well. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, come on.
Guys.
Baseball fans are usually smarter than that. The kid had a torn labrum. I mean, he batted. When I found out at the end of the year he did that, I don't even have, and he did get a little better toward the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think he was adjusting to the pain of trying to swing with that problem. But he's got that all corrected, so I think he's going to be fine. So that's good news. I liked that Carson Wiggins,
Jackson Wiggins' brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I didn't think he was coming
there was-
based on
yeah.
with the way the MLB.
I started hearing some stuff toward the end that the pro scouts, after he went to the combine, they said you probably would benefit from a couple of years.
Okay.
So he listened to them. This kid I think he's going to be draft eligible after his sophomore year, but you may get him for 2 years. I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah.
Then Will McIntyre coming back. Again, a lot of people are poo-pooing that because he didn't have a great year. I think the leadership alone of having a 6-year guy in there, somebody that loves Arkansas as much as he does, I think that's going to be big. Okay, what did he do in the portal? Well, I don't want to list all these names, but what he basically did was Dave Van Horn and his staff went into the portal, and everywhere they had an opening, he filled it. Now, they ended up with too many outfielders, and one of them already decommitted and went to Kentucky.
Yeah, I saw
and that's
that.
because Kendall Diggs, suddenly his spot's not open anymore. But he's got people for both of those other outfield spots, second baseman, first baseman. He's got a shortstop, he's a third baseman. And what he's landed are some guys that generally have batting average. It's more of a batting average thing than a home run thing. And they're good base runners. They're all good base stealers.
Yeah.
So he's doing what he said he was going to do toward when he had that press conference after their season ended, in which he said, we want to go back to being more of a small ball team, except that when you look at some of these guys, there are some of them that hit a lot of home runs.
There is, yeah.
So I don't think they're just going to be devoid of home run hitters. Now, they also went the JUCO route, and they got a JUCO catcher. And Dave Van Horn likes to have 2 catchers. He uses 2 catchers. You don't want to have a guy catch every game,
Right.
especially early in the season when you're playing 3 weekend games and 2 midweek games. You don't want a guy catching 5 games in a week. So he's going to have at least 2 catchers. This kid batted over 500 in junior college.
I saw you were telling me about that.
And that won't translate to 500 in the SEC, but I bet it transfers to 300. So he's got a good backup catcher. Ryder Helfrich, whose only problem last year was that he didn't hit very well because he was a freshman, is the new home run leader in the Cape Cod League.
Yep.
Bahiva Aloy was the home run leader, except he left.
Yeah.
And a lot of times this happens. If you're having a great first half of the summer ball, your coach will say, hey, you need to take some time off. We still want you back here in fall ball.
Yeah,
You take time off.
And look at the projected next year's MLB draft, like the really early projections. He's top 10, a top 10 pick.
So he's
projected
done what he needed to do. Now he can rest a little bit and come back for small ball. And Helfrich apparently decided to keep playing.
Helfrich's just going for it. I respect
So
it.
all of that looks good. I just think, and then pitching. They've got 2 of the top 5 or 6 pitchers in the transfer portal are going to come here.
Yeah.
And then there's a third one that apparently was injured last year, a real promising pitcher, but he was injured and sat out the whole year. So they're getting him too. So you got at least 3 incoming guys like that. And then you've got guys coming back, and we've talked about, again, Wiggins coming in. So I just think they look good. Dave Van Horn's done what he's been doing for several years, just reloads.
I think the draft didn't decimate them like they
That's
thought
right.
was going to happen. So I think that was really good that they actually fared really well when it came to the MLB draft this year. And you got Carson Wiggins, which was number 1 on everybody's, he's probably going, he's probably gone.
Yeah.
And he committed. So that's really awesome. I'm excited for next baseball season, but we got a lot more sports to go before we get to that. And shout out to Dudley Dawson, who has, if you're wondering, any of the guys that we're talking about here, he has a full breakdown over on our website of every single pickup that they have
Does a
had.
super job of covering baseball for Hogville and for us.
Yeah, so he does a great job. You can go check it out, hogville.net. He has everything over there, so check that out. And our final question of the day is from Eddie Lynn, who wants to know, with this proposed super division of college athletics, could current conferences be split up with new conferences created? I'd love to see the old Southwest Conference back with OU and OSU added.
Well, I'm not sure, but it's not out of the question. Here's what everybody's talking about: 45 or 64 teams, and we don't know how many is going to be in there. But let's say it was 64, and let's say you took the 4 conferences that exist now, which is ACC, SEC, Big 12, and Big 10, and you just let them be the conferences, and you put 16 teams in each one of them, that's 64. But I've always felt like when you get above about 8 or 9 teams in a conference, it's not, most of the time I grew up in the Southwest Conference, Arkansas, it was an 8-team league, and then it became 9. I don't like these 12, 14, 16-team leagues. So here's the thing. If you create this super division and you can somehow get all the network people that buy these games to contribute money into a pot and it goes equally to each of those, then you don't really have an advantage of being, oh, I want to be in the SEC because they'll get more money. If they all get the same, then teams are free. They're free to reorganize these teams along geographical lines. And maybe I'm dreaming here, but I've always believed that there's been a movement toward joining a league to make money, like what happened with the Pac-12 when it blew up. And it makes no sense. You've got these 2 California teams that are going to go all over the country, flying back and forth. And it's all because you're going to be making a little bit more money. Well, what if you didn't have to do that? What if they've arranged it where all the money goes into a pot and everybody gets the same amount? So then you could reorganize things along geographical lines. And what if they said, we're not going to have 16 teams in a conference, we're going to have 8 teams in a conference, which that would mean you would play 7 conference games, and then you would have 5 non-conference games that you play, but it wouldn't be like it is now where you just go play anybody. You would have to play teams from the other divisions, from the other conferences in the super division. So you're still going to have big games. They just won't be part of your conference. And so then at the end of the thing, you got to figure out who gets in the playoffs. If they did that, I don't think they would do it where you have an automatic, because you could end up with some conferences are weaker than others, and you automatically get to go because you finished second in a weaker conference. I think they would still probably rank the teams, have some sort of committee that ranks the teams, and then you would get into the playoffs based on that. But again, what would the geographical approach do? First of all, it would have a tremendous effect on reducing the cost for these schools sending their volleyball teams or their or their soccer teams or whatever. You wouldn't be sending them all over the place. They'd be in an area similar. So he's talking about a kind of an old Southwest Conference thing. So you could talk about, I don't know, I wrote it down here, a possibility. What if you had Texas A&M, Baylor, TCU, I got SMU down there. I could say Texas Tech in there, and OU and OSU and Arkansas. Yeah. Then you got 8 teams in that league. It's easy travel to those places, and the added benefit is if you want to do it and you're a fan, you can go on the road and go to these games easier. So I don't know that this could happen, but I like the idea of it.
The only thing I have a question about is what do you do about those way smaller teams that like playing bigger programs, that looks good on their schedule and those things? What do you do about that? Because you now have, you said 7 conference games and then 5 out of conference games, but only with those super divisions, right?
Well, you'd have to rotate it. It wouldn't just be with the same people all the time. There would be some sort of formula. Last year you played these 5 teams, now you got to play these 5, so that everybody's playing.
Right, but you're never playing any of those smaller teams, right? You're only playing.
Well, they're not smaller. They're not smaller teams. They're just teams from like if you had a Big Ten. If the Big Ten split into 2 conferences.
No, but I know what you're saying, right? But what I'm saying is, like, what do you do about the small? Like, you don't have a UAPB on your schedule.
They're going to be out anyway. That's just, there's nothing you can do about this. If they create this super division.
He said no. They don't matter.
I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but the whole purpose behind a super division is to get TV revenue.
Right.
And the TV people will tell you they don't want to see Alabama play Alabama State or South Alabama or somebody like that. They don't want that game. They don't want Arkansas playing Missouri State. They don't want games like that. If you're going to play a non-conference game, they want Arkansas to cross over and play a Baylor or a Texas Tech or you know, a Michigan.
Yeah, a bigger program.
Yeah,
so
a
to
Michigan
speak.
or
Yeah.
somebody like that, so that every game that appears on TV on a Saturday is an interesting game rather than some lopsided, dopey thing where you're playing somebody that shouldn't beat you. And we got one more thing to talk about, and that is the question we got last week.
Okay.
It was about the dynasty part of
College
college football
football?
2025. And I can't remember who it was now. Who's the
It was
guy?
Razor Alex 88.
Oh, Razor Alex 88. He was all excited. He said he was going to start off at North Carolina State. You started off where?
I started off, so I have 2 dynasties right now. I have a league dynasty, which is an online where I play with other people. I actually got invited to a Razorback fan dynasty also. Shout out to the Tuss Talk League. We're getting that started this week. And those are all big teams though. So they picked every Power 5, Power 4 team you can think of. I mean,
Right.
they're all over the place. I picked UCF in that league.
Okay.
So I had a chance to pick Georgia, but I'm making it harder on myself.
But you're
I'm
trying
picking
to
UCF.
move yourself up from
Right. So
it's
you're-
like it was a career.
Yeah, so I started, I'll actually say this, shout out Barry Odom. I started at UNLV for my personal dynasty is what I decided to do. I started at UNLV and I'm trying to move myself up. I want to get a big time job somewhere, so we'll see. Maybe I didn't do well in my first season. I'm not going to lie. I didn't do
And
well.
while you're doing that, I will just be content watching college football all day long, all week long. I mean, I'm going to be able to watch it on Friday. There's Thursday, Friday,
Okay, whoa.
Saturday.
You don't think I'm going to be watching college football
You
too?
won't be watching as much as I'm watching because you will have to work. I don't have to, not on those days, I'm telling you.
All right, well, that's pretty exciting for you. You watch your college football. I'll be playing college football
And you
25
can play in
and
a
watch.
phony baloney dream world in which you imagine yourself as a great coach.
I am. I mean, Courtney Mims is a pretty baller head
All
football
right,
coach.
whatever.
Anyways, that's going to do it for Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.